Hi guys, it's Ameriie and this is my December TBR. Now you know that I'm always moody when it comes to reading my TBR, but there are a few books that I really wanted to get to before the end of this year, which is why I think it will help me stick to my TBR a little bit better. I won't go too much into what these are about because I've already talked about them, some of them at great length. So without further ado, let's get into it. This one is also a star by Nicola Yoon. You know how much I loved Everything. This is a girl meets boy, boy meets girl story that takes place in one day. The girl's family is about to be deported and I believe she's from Jamaica and I believe he is part Asian. And one day, I believe they either fall in love or have a very meaningful connection. One of the things that drew me to this book, besides the fact that it's Nicola Yoon, besides the gorgeous cover, but number one, that is Nicola Yoon because I love her writing, is that the story has some very interesting POVs. Even the universe has a cool POV. I love when stories have multiple POVs, especially the ones that may seem a little on the edge. They may not be the main characters, but their POVs add a lot to the narrative. That really works for me. Joe Hill did that really well, I believe, in Nosferatu, and A.S. King did that in a really cool way too in, what was it? Was it Ask the Passengers? I think Ask the Passengers, which is really good. So I'm looking forward to this one. I definitely think I can get to it. It looks like it's pretty short, probably one that I want to read in no more than 2 sittings. All the light we cannot see. I don't have to say anything about this book. I've talked about it a bunch of times too, and you already know, Pulitzer Prize winner. It's a book I've been meaning to get to forever and still have yet to get to it. The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell, I told you about this one as well. Now, I meant to read this after Cloud Atlas, but then I since gave up on that idea because Cloud Atlas is pretty lengthy and something about this one was calling to me. And then when Slade House came out recently, and then I found out that it's kind of related to this, and although you can read Slade House without reading this one first, Slade House is very short, so it's tempting. There are some Easter eggs that you may not get if you don't read this one first. So I just want to finally get to this one already, and it's so gorgeous. I was so excited to read this when I first got it, and that's what happens sometimes, right? You get a book and then you're really excited about it, but somehow it like slips down your TBR. You just never know what's going to happen when a book starts to slide down your TBR. There's nothing better than going to the bookstore, buying a book, and then starting to read it right away. That's just like the best feeling. It's kind of like staying in the moment. You know, you're picking up something that's interesting and browsing the shelves. Sometimes I will have a physical TBR pile, and I try to keep it down to like, 4 or 5 books, or less if possible, but sometimes I just feel like I don't even want to have that at all, right? And I just want to just put all the books on the shelves because there's nothing like taking a book off the shelf and reading it. But when you see like a physical TBR pile, it's almost like a bookish to-do list. It's not necessarily a chore, but something that you have to do. You know, it's a little different from that magical pulling a book off the shelf and then just starting to read it. So I'm really thinking about just eliminating my physical TBR pile, like the 4 books that I set aside to read for the month or whatever, and just like putting them all on the shelf. I always set them aside because I'm like, this is the next book, these are the next books in line, but then they just feel, it doesn't feel the same as just pulling it off the shelf, like going back and then just saying, this is what I'm going to read because this is what I'm interested in right now. Spontaneous reading. All right, that was my little side note, but yes, I will be reading this. The Victorian City by Judith Flanders. All about Victorian life, the ins and outs. I actually started reading this one already and I really enjoyed it. She lays things out in layman's terms. She's quite humorous and very informative. The book does not feel like one of those boring textbook nonfiction type reads. It was really interesting and it has great voice. I was dipping in and out of this because it is nonfiction, but I think I'm going to just start back over and just read it all the way through. I'm just not great at dipping in and out. I do that with Game of Thrones, but I also have the series to support me so I kind of know what's going on. But in general, it's better if I read a book in as few sittings as possible. Which brings me to my next book on the TBR. The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. I am loving this book. Steve's coming. Not coming. I'm on page 263. So I started reading this. I read all of this in one day, almost. I'm almost finished. Maybe I will finish this either today or tomorrow. But first of all, I am loving this. Cora is fighting her way to freedom, and part of this is using the Underground Railroad, which is actually a literal railroad that has different underground stops. Now, at first I was thinking, is this magical realism? Because how are people not hearing this? But it's not like a huge train. There are tracks, but it's not like a big train or anything. It's like a small train. I don't want to tell you too much more about it, but it makes sense. Usually I don't like to read books about slavery and things like that for a multitude of reasons. I'll get more into that when we talk about the wrap up. But this is really, first of all, Colson Whitehead's prose is impeccable, and I really enjoy a book that's just well written on the sentence level. So there's that. And there's just something, you know what's really good to read? I'm really happy that I read Between the World and Me. If you haven't read Between the World and Me, give it a go. It's very short nonfiction. I do think it's a must read. I think it pairs nicely with this because I've heard some people saying that, you know, oh, there's a certain distance in the book and that this is how it felt with her struggling to freedom. No, it's not that. You know, you end up either leaving the book or the movie just pissed off and just kind of mad when you want to punch somebody and just angry and sick and tired. And also, you know, there's the whole thing is like our history did not start in slavery. I mean, we were not slaves. We were enslaved people. There's a difference. Anyway, I don't want to digress into all that. But I think Between the World and Me and the Underground Railroad is really great to read close together because it's about what happens and what happens to the specific character, but it's really about what allowed slavery to take place and the mentality and the ideas and all the different factors that were happening during that time. Give this a try. I highly recommend this. This is already one of my best reads of 2016. Absolutely. This just recently won the National Book Award, which it totally deserves. Again, pairs nicely with Between the World and Me. They're having the same conversation. It's almost as if they're in dialogue with one another, even though I don't believe that the author necessarily wrote it that way. What is that? Oh. I highly recommend. We'll get more into it during the wrap up for sure. I also have some ebooks from the library. I'm not sure if that's going to happen because these are my priority reads, and I try to prioritize physical books that I own over ebooks. So that's what I'll be reading. I can't wait to talk to you guys about it, and I will be coming up with my favorites of 2016 very soon. I've read some really great books this year, so it's going to be pretty hard to narrow down, but that is part of the fun, is narrowing down the best of the best. So we'll see how that goes. Don't forget to like the video. If you liked it, please share the video, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye! Won't go into too much details because this is the final book in the duology. Definitely read Six of Crows. What I really loved about both books is that they're very, very character oriented. Now they are plot driven books, but the characters really are the heart of the story. The characters are very specific, very distinct. We understand their motivations. I really enjoyed the romance in this. Sometimes it seems like Kaz is a step ahead of everyone, and it is almost funny because it's like, aha, but you thought this, but then I knew that. Aha, actually what I did was this. A couple of times I was like, oh my goodness, Kaz, really? But that's just Kaz.